So welcome everybody to the 10th of our 10th session for our FBIS training series. I think it's been thus far very well received, judging from the comments that I've had by email and in the sessions themselves. And certainly Jeremy and I, my co-host from FRC, we've benefited hugely by your insight, because it's only really when a system like FBIS gets used by the community that we can improve it and enhance it. And at the end of the day, it is something for all of us to use and benefit from. So we really do appreciate you guys taking the time, to be here with us, or even to just catch up on the videos. But it's always great having you here in person, because there's invariably insight and ideas and suggestions that are thrown around at our sessions. So a big welcome and a big thank you. So what I'm going to do now is to quickly share my screen and just remind us all where we are in the series. Okay, so we kicked off in September, so we've pretty much been going for 2 months. And today's the last session for this year. And I'll be taking you through the process in terms of adding SASS data. Now, I think most of you here are familiar with SASS data, and I do provide a bit of an intro in the pre-recorded tutorial. And then just a reminder, this isn't the end of the training series. We will be having some more next year. We're still going to finalize the dates. It was scheduled for February, but we might shift it a little bit depending on other issues that are arising within our organization. Okay, so I think what I'd like to do now is dive directly into the training session. So please just, as always, don't feel free to type questions in the chat as we go along, and make sure that you remain on mute. Excellent. So let's kick it off, and then we'll have some hopefully fruitful discussions thereafter.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the FBIS training series. Today I will be working through the process of adding SASS data. So SASS, as you know, is the South African scoring system, and it's a river health monitoring tool that uses aquatic macroinvertebrates to tell us something about river health or general ecological condition. So what I'm going to do today is to just find a site and add SASS data to it. I'm going to use one of my sites I'm most familiar with to demonstrate for today's purposes. Today's session is series 10 in the seminar series, in the training series. Okay, so G2 is the Jonkershoek River at Witbrug on the Jonkers River, which many of you know. And essentially what I'm going to do, I'm not going to add a site because that was covered in a previous session. I'm going to show you how you can add data to an existing site. Okay, so essentially I would open up the data or the site, and I would navigate down using my scroll bar to the area where it says add SASS. And essentially by clicking on that, I'm telling FBIS that I want to now add SASS data to this particular site. The form add SASS record for site X is opened up, and your site is shown as well as all nearby sites with a pin drop. And you can see I'm adding data to a well-known site in the FBIS River catchment. The first thing to add is the date. You can use the drop-downs to navigate to earlier records or earlier years and specify the month. I'm going to choose today's date and add the data as that. If I am the owner of the SASS data, then I can leave it as myself because I am the person who's logged in. But if you are capturing data on behalf of somebody else who actually did the assessment, then the option is given to change that to somebody else, such as Sean Close, who samples this site quite often. You could allocate the site to her. However, I'm going to leave it in my own name for now. I am currently SASS accredited, so I will tick that section to show that I am accredited. And now I'm going to browse and add an image to the site by opening up my photographs. I'll just choose one for demonstration. Add that site. Photograph. Then you'll all recall that on the SASS datasheet, the first thing you need to do is to rate your biotopes. We have designed the SASS form to mimic the SASS datasheet to make it as user-friendly and easy to capture your data. Now at this site, I have rated my abundance, and essentially I'm now going to capture it on the form. So my stones in current were a rating of 3, stones out of current were a 2, bedrock was a 1, aquatic veg was a 2, marginal veg in current was also a 2, veg out of current was a 3, gravel was a 1, and there was no sand and there was no mud. It's very easy, just click on the ratings for each of the biotopes sampled during your SASS assessment. Next up, in tabulated form are each of our 3 main biotopes. Just to remind you, we sample stones, veg, and gravel, sand, and mud together. And just systematically, I'm going to work through and add taxa to the site that are commonly recorded there. Okay, so first up, I'm going to put in notoramurids. Remember, we use rank abundance, 1A, B, C, or D. And essentially what I'm going to do is, remembering this is the stones, the veg, and the GSM, I'm going to add it for each. I've got between 1 and 10 in each biotope. And importantly for the site, it would take it up to a B. So I need to change that. For the betids, I got 3 species in stones, I got 2 species in veg, and 1 species in GSM. It automatically chooses the betids with the highest abundance, but importantly here again, I'm going to change that to a B because there were more than 10 individuals. What else did I find? I found leptophlebids. Okay, and that remains an A because there weren't that many. And I found plenty of telegonodids. Okay, scrolling down, I found 1 Eschnid in the veg, and I found livelulids in the veg and the GSM, but there were less than 10, so it remains an A. There was a reasonable amount of vegetation, so I found some corixids, found an acorid, and there was a couple of pleiads and a few velids. And you can see it very easily adds up the data or the abundance ratings for the site. So in other words, what you found at the site. Corydalids were actually very abundant at this site. Sorry, not veg, it was actually GSM. I found just 1 ichnomid. Hydropsychids record is the same as betids. Found 2 in the veg, in the stones, and just 1 each in the veg and the GSM. Now, importantly in SASS, remember, it's very important to note if these were all the same species or not. And in this case, the 2 from the stones we're in fact different to that from the veg. So what I need to do is to make this A disappear and to add an A for the site. So whilst the FBIS system does auto-populate most of the fields, the onus is on you, the SASS accredited person, to make sure that you are correctly filling in the data at the site level. Moving on, we found phyllopotamids, some bulboroctonids, glossostomatids, and my personal leptocerids, always present at the site, plenty in the veg. My personal favorite, Petrothromyces, and one pursulid in veg. We found a diving beetle in 2 places, quite a few almonds in their stones. There was a gyrinid, actually there were 3 gyrinids, so it'll get an A in the veg. And what else? Epithyricids and ornaments. Again, this went up to a B. 1 dixid, 3 dixids, and a few typulids, and 1 in the GSM. We didn't find any gastropods or any bivalves. Okay, so what happens then? This gets auto-calculated. The totals get added up for each biotope as well as for the site. I often record dactylidity, which is unfortunately, not yet in the SASS dactylidity. And I go stones equals A, and then if we recorded tadpoles, you can add that in, or any fish species. Although hopefully you would actually add this as a separate record in the fish component. Any other comments? I could say things like fire recently burned bank, and just double check that all your data is correct. We'll do it now, but always good policy to triple check. Make sure that you've got the same number of taxa in your total as was recorded on your sheet. Okay, and then I'm going to agree to share these data and submit the form. So once you've added in your biotope ratings and you've updated the SASS data, the next form that opens up is what we call the AVARTIC form, which allows you to add any sort of physicochemical data that you may have collected at a site, as well as things such as the depth of the water, etc., etc. So there it gives you again your site code and the date. And what I'm going to do, I normally measure these when I'm doing SASS. And for the first 5 parameters, what we've done is to give a rating or a range. So in my case, the river was between 2 and 5 meters wide. The water level was moderate flow. The default is not specified, so if you don't have this data, you just leave it blank. The turbidity, it was fairly clear. Canopy cover was partially open, and the embeddedness, which refers to how much the stones were embedded in the hypereus, or the substratum of the river, and in this case it was in the lowest category, 0 to 25. And then we get a whole host of options for adding various physicochemical parameters. Now, I know when we do SASS on a regular basis, we only measure four parameters primarily. Conductivity. Just a reminder, you need to convert your conductivity into what is specified in the data form. So in this case, conductivity must be converted to millisiemens per meter. And in this case, it was 6.5. Going to go down to the next variable. Sorry, I wanted to do dissolved oxygen. Dissolved oxygen. Okay. Going to add in, okay, here we go. Oxygen dissolved. We always measure that very high at the site generally. I'll also measure percentage saturation, 91. pH, it's very acidic streamless, so it's 5.6. And the last thing that we often measure when doing SASS is a instantaneous temperature measurement. Okay, so we've filled in all of our data. You'll see that it's been measured. It changes from gray to green when it's been added. The next step is to agree to sharing the data and click next and submit. So we've added our SASS data, we've added our abiotic data, and now we need to link this data to a source reference. Now you'll know in the previous tutorial that there are three options for source references: database, a peer-reviewed scientific article, a published report or thesis, as well as unpublished data. For database, you can either select from a pre-existing database. So for example, if you work with Cape Nature and you are adding in SASS data for Cape Nature, you would select Cape Nature SASS database. If your database isn't here and you want to create a new one, you can click Add New. And then you can add any comments around it. What I want to do is to just show you each of the different options. Peer-reviewed scientific article, the important thing to specify here is the DOI in the format that is specified. Once you punch that in, you click on the magnifying glass and it'll go and automatically pick that up from the internet and populate it into the source reference for the records. The third one is a published report or thesis. You have the option of choosing an existing one. So say it was the Berg River invertebrate study. You could then attach that data to that existing study, or indeed upload a new one onto the system. The last category is unpublished data. And I know that I often use this site for SASS accreditation. So I'm just going to look, see if I can see where that unpublished data collected during SASS accreditation assessment. Now I'm going to allocate this data that I've just uploaded to this particular unpublished data source. Again, there is the option to add a new one should you wish to. It's important to always check this list because I know a lot of river ecostatus monitoring data is added, and it's nice to be able to keep the source reference clean and standardized as much as possible. And the last point is then you submit that, and it will tell you that that data has been successfully submitted. And if I then want to go back and check on my data, I don't have to resubmit it. I can open up the map, put in my site code, that then comes up. I open up the site overview. move down to the SASS dashboard, open up the dashboard. And we should see our most recent assessment added, which was the 10th of October 2022. And we get that record added to all the others, as well as the most recent abiotic data that we have just added. And then if you wanted to double check on your SASS assessment, the actual data, as per previous tutorial, you can drill down to that data very easily. And if you are the owner of the data and you see that you've accidentally added in an incorrect species or taxon, you can very easily choose edit and then fix that record and save it again. I'm going to leave it there because I'm happy with the data that's been added. And that brings us to the end of the tutorial on adding SASS data. Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent, everybody. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of adding SASS data. I went into quite a lot of depth, so because I think this is quite an important module, and I think a lot of people are already using it, but hopefully it's not a particularly complex one. So happy to open it up for questions or comments about this tutorial, and indeed anything else that you may want some assistance with or guidance on. Great. Leo, welcome. Hi.
Hi, thanks, Helen. Just a quick question in terms of being able to import data from, say, Excel or anything like that. Are there any thoughts of being able to do that automatically as opposed to capturing everything manually? Obviously, there's a lot of data that's been collected, and it would be great to be able to import that, but I don't think people have the patience to sit and capture historical records manually.
Thanks, Leo. Good question. So when we first started developing FBIS, we wanted to include the option to what we call bulk upload SASS data, but it proved to be fairly complex because of the biotopes story and the additional auxiliary data. So we didn't pursue it. And to be honest, the actual capturing of data is fairly quick once you get your head in the game. And, you know, we are also trying to assist people with legacy data that they want to get in the system. We do have some warm bodies this side of the world that can assist with that. So I think the short answer is no, we haven't developed the upload template for bulk uploading. We can upload bulk data, but not SASS data, because SASS data has a few nuances that make it quite complicated to bulk upload. And we did try it and it didn't prove to be very successful. So if you do have data that you would like assistance with uploading, we can certainly look at helping with that. Because I know it is often hard to get legacy or old historical data in a system when you've got a lot of it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Helen.
Any more questions? Jem, do you want to just dive in with any questions? Aileen or Zanil, hi, welcome.
Hi, Helen. Hi, thanks. Just a quick question about adding the physical data, the chemical data. Is there any way to have a comment section there as well? Because sometimes we want to make a comment about a problem with the meter or something we missed, and there isn't an opportunity to comment on that when you're adding in that data. Is that something that could be added? We also collect discharge as well, and it's quite useful to have a way of recording actually a number in terms of discharge.
Okay. Yeah, at the moment, obviously, there isn't an option for a general comment. I guess the workaround at the moment would be to just put it on the SASS form, because presumably you do the
Sure.
abiotic measurements at the same time as the SASS. So I think for now, if you've got a problem with the meter, you could always capture it there. But what we're doing in this series is just making a note of extra suggestions and, little quirks that we need to look at. So I hear your point about discharge and a comments field. So we'll make a note and see what we can do with it. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks.
You're one of the organizations that's uploading copious quantities of data, so it's fantastic. I showed the system to someone yesterday in Rwanda, and I used the FBIS for the validation process, and there I saw 2 sites that had been data that had been added yesterday, so it was great.
Yeah, it's SASS week, so we're doing lots. I'm doing one
Wow.
as we speak.
Okay, excellent. Leah, another question, go for it.
Thanks, Helen. I'm involved in a project developing a decision support system for Okacom, working on the Okavango basin. There's a lot of data that is being collected and is going to be collected in that system, but obviously it's not according to the SASS protocol, it's according to the ZIS protocol or the NIS protocol, which depending on whereabouts you are. So I suppose my question is there potential to take this a little bit wider than the South African sort of picture and look at capturing other invertebrate protocols that are used in other areas?
Yeah, great question. So obviously my other hat I wear is developing these protocols. So I was involved in the ZIS one, not necessarily the NIS one. So the FBIS obviously is delineated by the South African boundary, including the shared water catchment. So where a river does flow beyond the border of South Africa, we are able to capture data. But that said, it doesn't yet include other protocols. So I'm assuming for Okacom, it's those 3 protocols, right, that are used. So the short answer is no. At the moment, it's only the SASS protocol that's included because of the delineation of FBIS being South African. We do have a vision for expanding the whole information system, ideally to Africa. And then I guess what would be possible is to take the SASS backbone and just have right at the start, select the drop down, because there's also the one we developed in Tanzania, Taris. And they're going to be more, I know for sure, Congo, and there's an Okavango one. So it would be lovely to be able to include that data. At the moment, there isn't a home for it here though, but yeah, maybe watch the space. We're hoping to get some follow-on funding, potentially, that may include that sort of thing.
Cool, thanks. That's exciting.
Any more questions? Jim, anything in the chat?
Nothing in the chat yet, Helen, but I was thinking, I'm not sure if you mentioned it already, but it might be quite nice to give just the perspective of how we sort of started with the SASS data and that phase of work involving kind of migrating historical SASS records from the old rivers database across to FBIS.
Sure, can do. So yeah, so SASS was very much probably one of the reasons we got the funding initially from the JRS Biodiversity Foundation, because we had this incredible legacy database, the rivers database, which I was also involved in developing. And I see Mike's in the room, so he was also involved with that. But unfortunately, funding for maintaining the system kind of wasn't forthcoming, and we had this probably over 10,000 SASS records or SASS assessments around the country at a national scale that were only then available sort of as an Excel spreadsheet format. And when we first applied to the JRS funders, we used that very much as a sort of a hook to try and get them interested. And thankfully, we were successful. And that's really was the first focus of the FBIS system back, 5 years ago now, where we wanted to mobilize and make this very valuable over 10,000 SASS assessment records available to the community. And that was not an easy task. You can imagine the nuances of importing old data from an old system. But luckily we had good developers, and then that data was in the system. Yeah, and then obviously developing the front end so that it wasn't as cumbersome. I know the Rivers database was a little cumbersome for adding data, but our brief to our developer who sits in Indonesia was, please make it look like the SASS data sheet so that it's, it's fairly easy. And we have found little odds and ends. I know, Aileen, your team has picked up where certain taxa were switched around. And, when you're adding data from a sheet, you kind of get quite quick and it's quite automatic. So we fixed all those little quirks, and hopefully now it's a fairly straightforward process. Good. I covered it all, Jim.
Yeah, definitely. And I know there was a lot of effort from Krista as well with trying to help make sure all the records were in order and up to date before we did that migration. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And the GPS coordinates which were changed, but that being said, it's a lot of data, and there are probably still errors in there. So again, we always say, if you jump onto a site and you look at the data, and I found, for example, very weird chemistry data because the person hasn't converted microsiemens per centimeter into millisiemens per meter. So you're sitting with, 200 as opposed, or 500 as opposed to 5. So we do continuously do checks, but it is our community database. So if you do find issues, please, the process to get it fixed is to reach out to the team. Thanks. Aileen, is that a new hand, old hand?
Yeah, I just suddenly thought I put a comment there just about the 502 gateway error that we often get. We seem to get that often when we load up our SASS data.
I think that's something to do with the internet connection, because if there's any gateway error, it's often related to the connection rather than the bug on the system. If you then try again a bit later, does it come right? Or
so what we find is why I wanted to raise it is it is loaded, but you just can't see it. And then the risk is if you add it twice, then you've doubled up the data. So I think if that does happen, because it does literally happen almost every time, not just in our office, but various places when I try and load. So I don't know if it's an FBIS problem or if it's a problem with our side, but you just don't want to be loading the same data a couple of times.
Definitely. Can I ask you a big favor? Can you just send me an email, sort of just when it happens next, just do a screenshot and just a sort of a explanation of where you were, so that I can ask our developers to just check if it's a bug in the back end, which they can fix. Because I agree, you add the data and then you get this message, you think, oh dear, I need to add it again. And then suddenly you've got duplicate records, which isn't ideal.
Absolutely. And then the other thing linked to that is when you add the data, can you explain a bit about the process of you approving it in the background? Because I know we've had this problem before because we're adding quite a lot. You have to do something sometimes to kind of release it. And sometimes people aren't aware of that, and people aren't sure why it's not there.
Yeah, so the data, I'm just sharing my screen. So the data is always available. It just hasn't been validated yet. So as soon as you add your data, there is sometimes a bit of a lag phase, like minutes rather than days, minutes and hours rather than days. But all data, once it's added, gets included in FBIS, but it gets flagged as unvalidated. So if I just did a search on unvalidated data in FBIS now, we can see which data sets haven't yet been validated. And so we can see there are 11 sites, and it looks like it's your part of the world. So we'll try get onto this week. But essentially, you still see these data, even though they haven't gone through the process of being validated by the FBIS team. And the way that we do that is, as the administrators, we can go and validate records. This is only a task that's visible for the administrators. And if I click See Unvalidated Data, I can then also select invertebrates. So I'll just filter the data down to, and then I'm seeing immediately there are 4 sites that you've added literally yesterday and the day before. So obviously we're not always immediately on hand to validate. So the process would be that we then, this is the workflow, I would go and have a look at this data by clicking on this View button. That would then open up the data sheet. And if it's the first time a site's been created, what I normally do is I just, zoom in and make sure that it's not sitting up the top of a mountain or what have you. And then just look at various other information here. I see here there isn't a source reference added. All the biotopes look fine. I can't say, though, if you did or didn't find, in fact, amphipods. The reliance is on you, the SASS, the accredited SASS practitioner, to accurately, add the taxa. So all I can do is make sure, like, you haven't accidentally recorded Perlidae, which, example, don't occur in this part of the world. And we also have some built-in checks around that. But essentially, once that was, I had a quick look at that, I would then close it up. And the process then would be for me to click on this magical green button, which would be validate. And I'm actually going to validate that data now because I've done all that I would have ordinarily done even offline. And then you can see if you then jumped back to the map, that site would then be no longer unvalidated, but it would become validated. But I think the important point is that we didn't want to create a bottleneck whereby, you add your data, you need it available for reporting, and the FBIS team isn't sort of in the office, and so we're not validating it. All data is immediately available, whether it's validated or unvalidated. I know the problems that we experienced previously was largely, when you were adding data, was largely related to the fact that the site and or the data was either being fixed and it was owned by somebody else other than you. And that's when, we had some stumbling blocks, which hopefully have all been resolved now. Does that clarify things?
Yeah, thanks. And that is important, the ownership of the data. It does make a difference if you want to edit it. We weren't aware of how important that is.
Totally. So you basically can't edit data that you don't own. So, if you, as the Grootvadersbos Conservancy, now own all of your data, there shouldn't be an issue. If you pick up an error, you can go and you can quickly edit it. But if the data was owned by myself or Jean Roos, then that ownership through discussion with said person would need to be changed. And there is a way to do it. It's not impossible, but it does mean that you can't, we have to make it that you can't edit data that you don't own, because otherwise everyone could go in and fiddle with anyone else's data, which doesn't make sense. Okay. But yeah, thanks for raising that, because I think it's really important, for people to know the process. And maybe just, if I can quickly take a minute more of your time, I also want to just show you that, we also validate, let's just see if there's any new fish data that's been added. So I see Zanil and Dean and yourself have all added fish data. So what happens here is the fish experts would have a look at the record and make sure that that fish species, is expected to occur in the river system, because obviously we wouldn't want Pseudoburbus bergii, which is the Berg River redfin, occurring in Limpopo, for example. So they're just various checks and balances that we've built into the system. Okay, excellent. Mandy, I saw you had a question earlier.
Yeah, Helen,
I'll
Mandy's got a couple of points, but she actually just had to leave to go to another meeting.
Okay.
But
Do you want to read out the points?
yeah, sure. So the first point was for us to consider the option of adding a video clip when you create a site or when you do a site visit. I guess it would just gives a bit more context of the site visually, which would be nice. But she did say that she understands that there could be data storage limitations. So made a note of it, and I agree, it's a really nice idea, and we can check with the developers to see if there's a way of doing it that doesn't use too much bandwidth.
That's a great idea, but I agree, we'd have to check for sure. Okay.
Cool. And her second point is she wanted to ask if there's any future plans to link to the PES EIS data, possibly another future functionality.
Okay, so yeah, I always forget these because there's the desktop PES and then there's the site-based one. So in the wetlands, when the wetlands module dashboards come online, which hopefully will be in the next 6 months, we will be serving up the PES layer. And I think there is already some data on the system, but I'm not quite sure at the site level PES what one would need and what one would add in. So at this stage, it's not served at a site level. It's just served from the spatial mapping scale. But perhaps Mandy, we can have I know she's gone now, but we can have a further discussion around exactly what she means around that. Or unless anyone else can provide insight.
Thanks, Helen.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think aligning with these national tools that are used for assessments and decision making it's very much like in line with our with our approach in the FBIS. It is something we've looked at, and yeah, we can maybe set up a separate chat with Mandy.
Cool. Anything else? I saw there was one question, was it early on? Any advice on where to renew my SASS accreditation in the Western Cape? Oh, that was direct to me. That's why I can only see it. The new accreditation, I was the SASS accreditation person for the Western Cape, but I recently handed over that hat to Tembela Bashulu, who's with the Goerits River. So the best is to contact the national auditor, Krista Tyrion at RQS, and she will be able to put you in touch with the relevant people. They should actually be advertising it soon. Because I know there are a lot of people that do need to be accredited. So hopefully you can follow that up. Leo, how can we help?
Thanks. Just I suppose a slight follow-on question from our previous one around the work we're doing in the Okavango. One of the tools that we've developed is effectively a SASS app. It's the SASS data collection app for mobile phones. The advantage being that data collected in field can be immediately uploaded to the database. Is something like that available or in the pipeline for FBIS in terms of just simply being able to capture the data straight into the database as opposed to going via the paper route and then database later on?
100%. Actually, we're on, it's very much in the pipeline. We're about version 2, but we focused initially on just the site creation and adding other biodiversity data like fish. But our developer is very much working on that at the moment, although we haven't got the latest release. it would be quite nice to see, I mean, you know, what you've done with the SASS already, and see if there's any way that we can piggyback off each other, unless your system is proprietary or closed, or because it's always nice to see what other people have already done. But yeah, it's very much in the pipeline.
Sure. I can talk to the developers. I know that the platform that they've built it on top of is effectively the ODK Collect system, and they've customized it and developed it into such a way that it speaks directly to the OCCOM database that we've built. So yeah, I don't know if that's in line with what you guys have done, or if you've done something completely different, but yeah, anyway.
Developers speak, yeah, I guess by the sound of it, it's very much customized to the system. I had always hoped that OCCOM we might be able to get some synergy happening with whatever system was developed, because there must be such amazing data in that whole platform, that some of which is highly relevant for SA as well. But anyway, thanks, Leo. So yeah, definitely in the pipeline, and hopefully early next year we'll have something out which we'll probably share with users to kind of test the system and see if they can break it, because that's how you get it better. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Helen. And if you do want to chat further about the OCCOM, we can maybe arrange a meet up with the developers, and yeah, whatever, and just sort of work out if there's any way we can learn from each other.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Excellent. Any more questions? Looks like that's pretty much it. So hopefully you've all got the necessary training over the last two and a half months to get going on those of you who aren't already adding data. But I would, you know, encourage you all to use our testing site. Just going to close this one. This is a site built specifically to allow users such as yourselves, who are still kind of in the training phase, that are still getting used to how to use the system. You can add fictitious data here without any worry that you're going to be messing up the system. So you could add a new site, you could add data to existing sites, and you know, just make sure that you feel comfortable with the workflows that are built into the system, and there'll be no harm done to the main information system. Once again, just to remind you that the it's going to open up the main FBIS. All of the information, if you go into the help on the main FBIS menu, you've got various bits of information. The first is about the testing site. So if you wanted to work through some workflows, you can enter the data on the testing site. Obviously, the manual is hopefully fairly useful. It was updated recently for September, just before the start of the training. So that's available as a downloaded PDF. And then last but not least, each of the video tutorials. So not the full training video, which was an hour long, but just the actual tutorials on each of the different components is available directly from here. And I'll be adding today's session, and that will make up the first 10 tutorial sessions for the FBIS training series. And then as just by way of closing, just a reminder that next year, after our break, we'll be diving into a few new aspects, which is talking through the water temperature time series dashboard. I haven't yet even tapped on that, but there's a whole new angle that's been added not that recently, it was 6 months ago or so. The third hat I wear is climate change and water temperature monitoring. And we developed, because there was a need for storing water temperature time series data. If you open up this abiotic module, you'll see there already exists in FBIS around 81 sites which have water temperature time series data. So this is hourly water temperature, or sometimes even 30 minutes or 3 hours, but it's data that's available on a time series scale. And there is a dashboard that's been specifically designed for that. I'm giving you a little bit of a teaser here to entice you back in the new year, where we've included all sorts of cool, in my mind, analyses that allow you to look at water temperature. Don't worry what I'm doing now. I just want to show you some nice graphics. So I've asked for a whole year of data that has been uploaded by myself and colleagues to the system. And essentially what we get, we provide you with these graphs of water temperature, which has been recorded at an hourly scale, but converted through a series of Excel spreadsheets that's been imported directly into the system. It's work I've done in collaboration with Nick Rivers-Moore. Leo, he's your old colleague from INR. He and I have done a lot of work on water temperature and how to make it accessible and usable. So this sort of thing gives you over what we call a thermograph, and you've got access to that data. And then you've also got access to all sorts of annual metrics, which we call, annual description statistics, which we call thermal metrics, as well as monthly magnitudes and what have you. So that's going to be the focus of the first session we kick off next year. And then we'll be diving a little bit deeper into the physicochemical dashboard, although you have already seen a lot of it. So that will be a short session. And then I will actually speak to adding water temperature data and adding physicochemical data to a site. And then we may have 1 or 2 more sessions added on, just depending on how things are going. But yeah, so that's, I think that's a good note to end. I'll just open it up for any questions that might have arisen. And if not, then I will thank you all once again for joining us. It's very much appreciated, and hopefully you've all learned a lot over the 2 months. And yep, so we'll have a break. Use FBIS, email us if you have questions, and I will again send out emails in the new year for the start of the next series. So Jeremy, thanks as always for your help in hosting the sessions. And yeah, go well, everyone. Thank you very much. Cheers.